زين وايد زين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رحب فيكم. Welcome all. I hope that Ramadan is easy and is going very pleasant with all of you. And remember, as much as you love Ramadan and you enjoy your time في تعبد الله سبحانه وتعالى، كل ما تستمتعون you will not feel any pain and rather يمكن إذا حصلت تعب بتحس بلذة التعب. ولكن إذا أنت كنت تتململ وراقد والسوالف ذي كلها فتأكد أن احتمال يكون في مشكلة في تفكيرك عن رمضان أو ممارستك حق رمضان. So يعني think about it. يعطيكم العافية. So we are going to continue today with our session, and our session is talking about, I hope that you're looking at the presentation now. I just shared it. So we are going to continue with the context of the organization. طبعا just recall, we started with the ISO 9001-2015 and we talked about some details of what makes it different يعني, and we also talked about the table of contents of ISO 9001-2015. Of course, as I said, ISO is the international standards organization. 9001 is the name that is related to quality management system. That's the number. 14,000 is for environment. 17,000 is for labs and so on. 2015 is the version, so the latest version of the quality management system at the International Standardization Organization, whatever it's called. So that is ISO. And then we said that the first three are just like definitions and so on, but the real standard of table of contents starts for number 4 and it goes to number 10. Number 4 is the context of the organization, what it makes the business, what makes the business or your company or your university competent, marketable. What makes them marketable? So do you talk about the context of the organization, and then we talk about the leadership, the objectives, what we need to achieve, and the policy that we are going to go through. Either we are going to get quality in services or quality in product. Then we have our roles and responsibilities, the job responsibilities. And after you have your objectives, you plan to achieve your objectives. After you plan to achieve your objectives, you hire people and you bring in money, human and financial resources, so that you achieve your objectives. After you have all of your team, now you can start operate. While you're operating, you need a clear process for all your operation, for production, for hiring, for buying, for selling, and so on. After you operate and do your job, you need to evaluate what was your performance by every year or half of a year or every 3 months. It depends on your management review cycle. After you evaluate yourself, you say, okay, I need to improve in 1 to 3, and that is number 10, improvement. Okay, so that is what we have taken from last time. So context of the organization. So we are talking about here the context of the organization, which makes it marketable. So I would say here it is influenced, the organization context influenced by its business environment that characterizes each sector industry, the consumers, the required knowledge, everything, the material, the services, everything, and how it uses all these factors, internal and external factors, to make its organization competent and strong. Simply, the organization should understand itself. It should understand how does it interact with its employers. It also needs to understand how it interacts with the external people, whether suppliers, customers, or anyone. It needs to understand itself. This was not part of the old version of 2008. It's part of the new version. that the organization should understand itself. Now, what should it understand itself? And by the way, these two slides came the final exam last time, and of course, it's obvious, it's straightforward, it's easy, and this is what came the exam last time. So let's continue. Context of the organization. It needs to understand its internal factors, and it needs to understand its external factors. Now, talking about the internal factors, as we can see here. So the first point, sorry for that. It happens sometimes, my PowerPoint just crashes and goes out. Okay, so I'm back. So what we have here, I think is going to crash again. The internal context. So I'm talking about the internal context. The first thing we will talk about is the performance factor. Then the resource factor, human operational factors. What do we mean by the performance factor? I'm talking here about what? About an internal context, okay? I'm talking about the internal context. Internal context, that means internally, what is my performance? How do I understand my performance? I understand my performance through various factors. For example, my product and service offerings. And how much do I sell? What is the quality of my service? That is the performance. What are my financial results? How much profit I'm making? That is a performance. How much I'm satisfying the regulatory requirements of the country? That is a performance factor. So all of these are called performance factors. So just to give you an example, what I brought in the exam. So I brought, for example, مثلا KFC, Kentucky Fried. Oh my God, and we are eating now. I should bring another example. خلاص, I said KFC. So, for example, I asked them to identify the internal context and the external context as part of the context of the organization, and then I stated state 3 of the internal context and give me 3 different examples for each one. So they are going to state the first one and say, well, the performance factor is the first internal context, and then they're going to give an example. Many students give examples. Mentioning product and service offerings. مثلا, just an example. Financial results. The students do not. It happened that in the exam, some of the students, few of them, they did not mention the example in the context of KFC, and in the context of the example that I brought in the exam. So of course they lose half of the mark because it's not clear that they know exactly what do they mean by product and service offerings. So they need to give an example about the quality of the product, about how fast do they serve. It's just they say that it's just few words, but it's clear that he's reflecting that where he's reflecting it on the example that is stated in the exam. And then, of course, how much profit they are making at the end of the month, which is financial results, and if they are satisfying all the regulatory requirements in terms of the safety for food, cleaning, the cleaning area of the restaurant, and so on. So that is one of the internal contexts. Another internal context is the resource factors. Resource, that means, again, resources could be human resources, even though that it is spelled or here as a different factor, but resources usually mean human resources, or it means the financial resources, or it means your infrastructure, your environment, your assets. It's all of your resources. Masadir, it's your resources, right? So these are, this is another example. And again, if I apply it to the university, which is an easier example, I would say here, you can see what are the resources at University of Bahrain. and what are the resources at another university, which is a small university, for example. I will not mention any name. Definitely, you're going to mention what the University of Bahrain has a very strong infrastructure, better environment, better assets in terms of the software or labs and so on. Okay. Just a moment, because I think so my laptop is stuck. I don't know if you're listening to me. Well, بديت أشيك. Just hold on. I think so my laptop got stuck for some moment. Why is it doing this to me now? لا. Okay, I'm back. Okay, so here we are going to continue the internal context. We finished with the performance and resources. Human factors, of course, if you're going to compare again universities, how much competent you have faculty members who teach, if you have good faculty members or not. يعني if you're going to compare University of Bahrain with Harvard University مثلا يعني. So are we competent as resources, human resources with them or not? In terms of faculty members, technicians, in terms of the infrastructure, which is part of the resources, in terms of the environment that they have and we have. So you can see how when you define the resources and human factors, you can see the difference. You can see yourself in comparison with others. So this is why the context of the organization is really an added value to this ISO standard for 2015, because it gives you an insight of what is going on within your organization. Again, what are your operation factors? Your operation factors such as the production and service provision capabilities, performance of the quality management system. It is the operation of your processes, operation of your service, operation of your quality management system, operation to see what is the customer satisfaction. طبعا these factors that I have mentioned here, these are the popular factors. You always can have more and more factors that you can add in specific, something that is related to the governance of the organization. Governance of the organization. طبعا واحد بيقول لي what do you mean by governance of organization? Governance means policies. You have clear policies, procedures. You have clear chart. It is the governance, الحوكمة in Arabic, الحوكمة. Okay, it's different from all what is listed at the top there, because يعني, let me think about an example. You at the university. I'll take a smaller example. I have many examples, but this one is complicated. Again, if you go to a restaurant, the employee comes at a certain time, he leaves at a certain time. Where is that written? It's written in a policy. What does the employee do? He does 1, 2, 3, 4. Where is that written? It is written in the procedures. So the governance says that what is the job description of everyone? When does he come and when does he leave? Now, is that is now this is the governance. When the employee comes at a certain time and leaves a certain time, I'm just obeying the policy, which is part of governance. However, if I'm going to ask how was that a good performance or a bad performance? Employees coming on time, all of them, or some of them are not coming on time. Here I go to the performance factors. If they are obeying the procedure in the way how they talk to the customer, how they serve food to the customer. For example, they come to the customer, they greet him, they smile, they give him the menu, and then they come after 5 minutes, they thank them, and then they come after 20 minutes, they serve the food. When they serve the food, they say thank you, for example. It's all written procedures. They do this by law, by the procedure. So these are all part of the governance. There are policies and procedures. What is the performance in obeying those policies and procedures? You go back to the performance factors. How competent are they? Human factors, and so on. So this is part of the context of the organization. Going to the external context, there are many external context factors, and usually many enterprises, business enterprises, they do this internal context, but they forget about the external context, which is very important, very important. It depends on how small is your organization, how big, but it is very important. So talking about the first one, the economic factors. Definitely, of course, if you talk about exchange rate, economic situation, inflation forecasts, or credit availability, if you have money within the bank or not. So all of the first three ones, money exchange rate, economic situation, inflation forecast, all these are for big organizations. If you talk about banks, that will be very suitable to talk about them. But it will not be suitable if you talk about a very small burger shop, if you talk about a small clothes shops. But definitely, how much you have in the bank is very important as an economic factor. Social factors. Social factor, that means unemployment rates. This could be good for you or could be bad. And if there are high unemployment rates, that means you can get many people who can be hired at your organization at a lower rate, مثلا. So high employment rates could be something good for you or bad. Safety perceptions, that means, is it safe for the employees to come to your organization or not? Okay, so that is part of the social factors. And so on. Education levels. Are you opening in a place where the education level is very high or low? Because if it's very high, you need to present products in your market differently. The product that are presented in Al-Usra market are different from the presented at Al-Muntaza supermarket. And if you look even more deeply, the places where Al-Usra opens is different from the places where the Al-Muntaza market opens. Each one serves a different social sector. So everyone has his business, but they have their business at different places. And if they go vice versa, like they change their places, both of them, they are not going to succeed. So social factors, you can see how it's important. Again, you need to define the social factors as a context of the organization. So if I talk about the Muntaza market, if they define the social factors for themselves, it is a key success factors for them to succeed. But if they did not identify the social factor, that would be a problem. Again, ISO is helping the organization. They organize themselves and identify all this. For any businessman, he may identify all these factors just through his experience. He can know it, he knows it. and I still remember when I sat with Al-Muntaza many years back as part of a consultation job. So we discussed a lot about the social factor, and they already have it in mind. But we discussed it again and so on. But the idea is that how did they know it? Of course, ISO is just a reflection of the whole experience of many businessmen in the world. And then they reflected that were into standards. Okay, so the standards are just a reflection of what all organizations need to succeed. Political factors, are we politically stable? Of course, but you remember that many years back, 10 years back, when we were not at a political stable situation, many shops closed, and I mean they left Bahrain and went to other countries, or they started closing. So it happens that this really affects political factors, not for Bahrain, for other countries. Sometimes the international trade agreements are affected, which also raises the prices. مثلا again, a political factor could be, now we are talking about COVID-19. Because of this COVID-19 thing and a lot of precautions, the items that we need to order, instead of taking 2 weeks, it takes a month, or instead of taking a month, it takes 3 months. Now imagine that it takes more time to arrive, which means I have less products in stock for people to buy. And we can see how this political factor affected my business to make things available for the customer. Technological factors, such as new sector technology. So you have a new technology. Would new technology affect you? Yes, of course, definitely. It could affect both in a good way or a bad way. I just remember an example of a technological factor is that most of the chips, what we eat, the microchips, are made in Taiwan and South Korea. And because most of them are made in these two countries, there is a serious problem, is that they are not managing to cover the whole need in the world. But it's not only them. We have also US. They have Intel. They also have microchips, but they cannot manage the need in the world. Because they cannot manage that need in the world, there are problems that producers of cars and many other kind of products that need those microchips as part of an intelligent car or an intelligent product that they have, now they cannot produce that amount of cars. They're losing money. They're going to produce cars without those chips. And that is a serious problem. It is a serious problem, very serious. So that is a technological factor that would affect my business. And other technological factors could be something very simple: a new equipment that makes my product much more faster. So sometimes equipment are, if you talk about coffee shops and talk about equipment, there are always new equipment which makes things better in terms of coffee. Today I made you hungry and thirsty. Market factors is another external context. ISO is telling you, if you're going to write your context of organization, consider the market factors. Consider who are giving the same business in the field. Consider what is your market share. You are covering 15%, for example. That was with Muntaza Market. When we were talking with them, they cover about 15%. Is your market share affected when Lulu hypermarket is opening, or it is affected when Mega Mart store is opening? So what are your substitute products? What makes you different? What makes you become a leader in a certain product or in a certain service that you provide. So what I'm trying to say here is that you can see that if I write clearly what are my market factors, it will help me to succeed. Again, statutory and regulatory factors. What are the regulatory factors externally that I need to obey? And something related to safety, for example. And now, a very clear example, COVID-19. If you don't satisfy the requirements of safety regarding COVID-19, your shop is going to be closed, right? So you can see that if these needs to be identified. Now, the ISO 9000-2015 mentioned the internal external factors as such, as you have seen there. However, ISO 9000-2015 says that where there are many other models that you can use. And these models that you can use could really help you to identify the internal and external factors. And it is your choice to use whatever you want. So it says here, ISO 9001 provides no suggested method to analyze the context of the organization. So they don't suggest any method because there are many methods available, but there are many models. What are those models available? For example, PESTEL analysis is one of those models: political, economical, social, technological, legal, and environmental. Maybe it's the first time for you to hear about PESTEL analysis. I'm going to show it to you after this slide. So the PESTEL factors is one of those models. There are other models. For example, they mentioned the SWOT analysis, which is the strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. So that is another model. Another third model, for example, is the Porter's 5-force model. So there are many models which help you to identify what is your context in terms of the internal and external factors, and so on. So let me go better here. So PESTEL analysis, for example, starting with it. Again, it is the same story, but I'm going to repeat now. But the beauty of what I'm trying to show you here, that I'm showing you examples. So this is the PESTEL analysis. Again, PESTEL, P for political, E for economical, S for social, T is for technological, E for environment, the second E, and L for legal. And PESTEL is written sometimes LE or EL. It's fine. The old name for PESTEL was only PEST analysis, without the L and E, without the legal and environment. It was only political, environmental, social, technological. But with time it changed and it added the L and E. So political factors we already mentioned: political stability, future legislation, regulatory bodies. I don't know if you know what are regulatory bodies, but regulatory bodies, for example, if you're talking about roads, the regulatory body is the Ministry of Works. If you're talking about universities, the regulatory body is the Higher Education Council. If you're talking about schools, the regulatory body is the Ministry of Education. Okay, so I think you got the point that I want to say. So how much you are satisfying the regulatory body? And now we're talking about, for example, COVID-19, the regulatory body is the Ministry of Health. Government policies, which could also be part of regulatory body. Funding, grants, initiatives. Again, these are political factors, which means that you are getting the fund from a certain bank, for example, and you need to satisfy that bank. But if it happens that you're affected by this fund, that could affect your business, the whole business, if your fund is affected. So you need to be careful. Market and political lobbying groups. This is something really higher than what I can explain now, but you always can have lobbying groups, a group of whatever. I think so. You already have an idea, but imagine if a group of restaurants or a group of markets. Let me be very clear. For example, you cannot import a certain product because there's a lobbying group against you importing that product. I think so. This is enough for me to say. Wars and conflicts, if there are any wars and conflicts, it will affect you. But I don't need to explain everything again, but this is part of it. This is a political factor. If you go back to economic factors, there are many economic factors. One of those economic factors is the there are many policies now related to economic factors. مثلا as a business organization you need to pay more to هيئة تنظيم سوق العمل, the LRMA or LRMA. So there are new policies that you need to pay more, and these policies are putting a lot of burden on those small businesses. And after the taxation issue, it became even harder on those small businesses. Before you need to pay for every employee peanuts, few dinars, but now for every employee you need to pay 10. Then if imagine you have 20 employees, so you need to pay 200 BD monthly, and so on. So all this really affects the organization. Weather issues, trade and monetary comes from money. So any trade or money conditions would affect you, and so on. So I will not explain that every part of those. Because I'm not explaining pestle. The idea that I'm not trying to explain pestle here, I'm just trying to tell you that that is one of the models that will help you to identify the context of the organization. So we already understand what do we mean by the context of the organization. Again, social factors that could be related to the demographics, the place you're living in. Do they have high salaries or they have low salaries? Are they married or most of them are single? Is it a place of people living a European style more, or it is more to an Arabian style or an Indian style, or even a Filipino style? Why I'm saying this, because the demographics, and if you go to Manama, you will see how much that demographics reflects on all the shops that are surrounded in that area. So again, what does ISO say? ISO says that consider social factors, okay, in your ISO standards. So the ISO standards is telling you that you need to consider the social factors to be successful. Okay, you need to see the opinions of the people to be successful. You need to see the customer's attitude to be successful, and what is the buying pattern of those consumers. Do they buy a lot or they don't like to spend a penny? And you need to know what is the attitude of those consumers in that place. So all these are social factors. Technological factors, of course, if you have new technologies, it will affect you positively. But sometimes the technological factors, if you are not up to date, it may affect affect negatively, and you lose your business. This is part again. We finished the PEST, P-E-S-T, now the L and the E, and the legal factors, something related to the government, legal factors, something related to the environment, for example, copyright, for example, and copyright, that means you have taken a product that is from another place without their permission, and that is part of a copyright, is a big thing, and you may lose your business because of that. A lot other legal factors, health and safety law. If you open any shop, you need to have the fire department to come to you, just to make sure that you have all the precautions against fire if it happens. And you also have the health people come to you as a visit, just to make sure that you also satisfy all the health requirements. And you also have the Ministry of Health that also comes to you just to, no, not the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Works, I mean. They also come to you just to make sure that the oil that you are using within you have a clear sewage system, and it goes to a place that can handle that much of oil, because imagine that all of this oil, when it goes underground in the sewage inside the pipes, how much disasters it could cause. And that is also another story, but it is related to Ministry of Works. If we go back to the environmental factors could be the weather, the climate, and of course many other things. So if it's always rainy, we don't have it always rainy in Bahrain, يعني. But in other places, when it's always rainy, it would affect your business if you cannot run your business within rain. And if it is it starts snowing, for example, in many places, that would affect very negatively. In Bahrain, طبعا, because we have a very hot weather, if you don't have places which are air conditioned, that means you have a problem. So I'm just mentioning all those examples just to tell you that the pistol analysis, it would affect. There is another factor that I would like to add, then I see it very important, which I call the marketing factors, and this is part of my addition or my value added here, because I see that is very important. Is that what is the total market, the market share, and actually it is mentioned by ISO, but the pistol analysis itself does not cover everything. So the marketing factors are important. What makes you different? What are the barriers for you to enter the business? What are the trends of the current business so that you can move with the trend or open a new trend? And so you need to know information about the marketing factors, and I like that to keep it as a separate point. طبعا there are other people. SWOT analysis is one of them. I may keep this very quickly next time to explain. I think so. That's it. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? None.
يعطيك العافية دكتور.
Allah يعافيك سلمك والله. Okay, great. Thank you very much. That was for today. Context of the organization. I hope you have gained a lot. يعني يعطيكم العافية. شكرا. مع السلامة.